Hey guys, I'm Matt Lighty, and this is my Onigoroshi build. This is a follow-up to the previous video where you saw me acquire Onigoroshi in the Gucci Hobo game mode. Oh, thank you so much. There we are. Wowee. Look at that. Oh my god, he also dropped a fucking medium life flask. So this build is comprised of only uniques. It is currently level 84 Chieftain, and I'm using Tectonic slime with a very interesting blood magic setup. Let me quickly go over what exactly the build interactions are and what it does. Now, Onigoroshi is a one-hand sword that I use in both sockets. It has very high crit. It has very high base fizz. It gives me could be the strongest buff in the game, which is 123% of the physical damage from the sword is gained as extra fire. Gives me a pure immunity, attack, cast, movement, can't be stunned, etc. So huge damage is fizz, huge damage converted from fizz to fire. So things like Tectonic Slam work really well because it also has conversion to fizz to fire, and it can be used with the sword. Now, Tectonic Slam is a skill that basically hits the ground and does a bunch of fissures. Now, these fissures are actually mimicked by the Chieftain's ability. Tahoe Forest Strength basically does a secondary slam that kind of copies your skill, which, as you can see, overlaps on the slams themselves. And you'll see this when I actually hit with an enemy nearby. It basically does this times 2. This also is compounded by Fist of War, which as well slams the ground an additional time. And things like elemental damage scaling, things like Pulverize, Melee Fizz, Fire Pen, really crank up the fact that we're a slam skill. We want to hit once and pretty much one-shot the pack, or even rares nearby. So interesting interactions with the build. I would say there are two big ones. One, it's our aura setup. So we're really embracing the fact that in Gucci Hobo, there's a limited stability for certain things. By doing so, we're actually going to go blood magic. This totally takes care of all of our mana issues, but lets us not reserve any mana into auras. Now, how is that good? How is that bad? Well, the good news is mana issues are gone, and it lets us, we now have to allocate our life for auras. That could be bad. However, we take advantage of that by doing a petrified blood build. So we have things like Vitality, Precision, Herald of Ash, traditional clear and damage, petrified blood, to make it so even though we're reserving half our life, it's not detrimental. And we actually have Purity of Elements hooked up to an Eternal Blessing, which does give us a free aura because technically we have nothing on mana reservation. Taking care of that also is our life reservation efficacy of skills, which is a very high value, being 20% versus the standardized 8 or 10 for like a normal node because it's considered life, which puts us at about 45% life left. Now this also is nice because it lets us technically be on low life. So things like Wonder Traps in Gucci Hobo gets us increased rarity. Things like Lori's Lantern is extremely good. This gives us Chaos Res, movement speed, and damage. I receive as unlucky, so meaning if I get hit for damage, if I get hit for a 7, it rolls the second dice, and maybe that second dice is a 4. Well, it picks the 4, picks the lowest of two numbers, right? So that's pretty fantastic there. Another fun interaction is because we're doing a crit build, because we're doing fire build, everything we hit is ignited, right? Now this is what triggers the Her Blessing from the sword, but the very fun part is it actually takes advantage of the Fire Mastery. We recover 2% of life when I ignite a non-ignited enemy. So it means every single pack I hit, I basically heal to full. It's doing 2% of my max life, which is now half, so it's kind of like 4% of my life. And then that combined with Cannibalistic Right, because I've always spent life on skills, means we have 2% life on hit and 2% life on kill, keeping us basically perpetually topped off. Now, as a Chieftain, we have this sweet ability called Velako Storm's Embrace, which gives us endurance charges when we War Cry, which is basically all the time because we have Infernal Cry for supplemental damage on left click. As we're walking, we're War Cry. We're permanently at basically 6 endurance charges. 3 from base, 1 from the sweet skill there. And we have 1 more on tree here and 1 more on tree there. I can, in fact, reach this one if I so chose. It's a little far, but it's not totally terrible idea because I'm only level 84. So I have some room to grow. Now, that being said, why is that cool? Well, it's cool for 2 reasons. One, because Tectonic Slam does grant additional branching fissures per endurance charges, meaning it does a wider, bigger attack, which is spicy. Every now and then it does consume them, but I'm always capped off. You may notice that I have a very high amount of endurance charges. Well, that's because we have Restless Ward on. This gives us increased duration and also 75 life regen per endurance. That's a lot of life regen, which means our life regen normally is 1,270 with Vitality and with our tree. So we've about basically 1,300 life regen, and we have 1,800 unreserved life, meaning our life regen is about 75% of our base life pool. that feels good, considering we also have Leech, considering we also have our Hinekora Death Fury. This gives us 1% Leech, a little bit Strength, and Ash on hit. Now, this can also be converted into Tukohama's War Herald if you had an additional Val Warchief setup. I don't have the links for it currently, but that is also valid, as this too gives you damage dealt from your totems, leached as you. In a Trade League setting, you would definitely want to grab this, and you definitely want to anoint something like Panopticon for 150% additional totem buff effect, which is kind of insane for single target. So, that's the gist of the build. Basically running around with Blood Rage, I tap right click, and I have one-shot packs, and if I don't one-shot packs, I do a little dance and hit him again with my Fist of Rage as back upper. Let's do a quick map here, just to showcase what the build looks like. Single target's okay, considering Gucci Hobo, that is. And clear is pretty good, but it feels good, which is, I guess, the most important part. I turn off all my MTXs so you can get a gauge what it actually looks like. But yeah, it's mostly just running around, tapping right click, and things just kind of die, which feels nice. Because it's a slam build, it does have that kind of slam build feel. But as you can see, that was a one hit on a rare. That was a Gargantuan rare, and it basically did half its life pool. Pretty standard. There's where I got one shot. You can see as I'm taking damage, my Petrified Blood is allocating that damage as like layover damage, which is what it does. It takes the damage from hits and basically reserves it temporarily, and then I recoup it back slowly. Now things like having my high life regen help that, having my leech help that. So ultimately it looks like my life pool is very low, but it doesn't feel very low. Normally these builds are susceptible to dots, but because you have 1300 life regen, it's not so bad, honestly. If this build was in Trade League, it would definitely pop off and you'd be able to like play it to 100 no problem, whether you're using Oni or not using Oni. Just the concept of the Blood Magic Tectonic Slam Chieftain, I think is a pretty solid one in general. If you're okay with the slam build. I mean, there's tons of room to scale here with Awakened Gems, with Forbidden Flesh and Flame, that sort of stuff. So, but even in Gucci Hobo, obviously you're, much better off playing a caster, something that scales better. However, if you want to play, real melee, it's slamming ain't bad. Slamming's an honest living. It pays the rent. One of the nice things about Tectonic Slam, to be honest, is it has what I would refer to as smart pathing. So it, like many skills, travels across the ground. However, because it has smart pathing, it knows to travel up walls and underneath things, which is kind of nice. You have a lot of these skills which have a hard time doing that. Tectonic Slam does not. It knows to like go up a wall, around a corner. Here's a boss fight. This is an interesting one. This is normally I would say this is typically a spookier boss fight compared to most boss fights. There's Solaris. One down. You can just park on the boss and right click if you want, but I tend to just want to rotate around until you have your slams back up. Most of them run either every couple of hits or every 2-3 hit the thing, so I tend to just suggest rotating around. Oh, someone got me there. That Solaris fucking Pierce is wicked hard. You are susceptible to just being one shot. I mean, it's basically 40% of the life total you have allocated, plus your available life total. So if I get hit for a 3k straight up, I just die after mitigation. That is what it is, That's the life of playing Petrified Blood, I guess. Again, if you were in Trade League, you could do things like having half your rares allocate damage taken from physical converted to fire. You could have fucking an extra aura, probably. You could have a whole lot of fucking stuff. But considering Gucci Hobo, really it just takes like a really hard-hitting one hit to kill us. Aside from that, we really don't want to die very much or very often because we have such high regen, such high leech. It feels quite comfy, quite tanky in general. I really don't die very often, but those hard-hitting bosses will get you. But yeah, that's the basis of the build. It's pretty fun. I think in Trade League it'll be a pretty solid build if you were to play it as a second build. Obviously, you could do it as your first build. If you want to grind out an Oni, which could take anywhere from 6 to 25 hours. If you want to see how that's done, you can watch the previous video. But yeah, in a Gucci Hobo setting, the build's totally fine. I would say its wheelhouse definitely, low red tier is probably where it starts to cap out just because of gear. Not a whole lot you could do better with like certain things. Obviously, you can get some pretty crazy slots, but farming them out yourself would be a bit ridiculous. But at Trade League, you could probably do pretty much anything comfortably aside from Uber Pinnacle bosses, I would say. You'd have no problem doing. You could easily push the character to 100. You could easily have 7, 8k total life. You can even go Calum's Heart if you wanted, or Brass Dome, etc. You can easily reach, 87 all res, close to it, with proper investment, and it shouldn't really be much of an issue. And you can have a lot of these things automated, like instead of having a mark of submission, just having a Warlord's Ring that had curse on hit, But yeah, that's the build. That's the Blood Magic Tony Goroshi Oni Slammer. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed the league if you're playing it. If not, I suggest checking it out next time we do any sort of Gucci Hobo event or charity event. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, I would recommend the build in general. I'll put like a loose, visual guide in the description below, but you could kind of piece it together from the video. All right, that's it. Lighty out. Bye-bye.